Um,
All right. Welcome, everybody. I am Carol Huckle, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host of Intuitive Parenting, Carolina Mariposa. And we are coming to you live from inside the Sensitive Empowerment Community, which is a safe alternative to social media for sensitive people. And you can find us at sensitivecommunity.com. And Carolina, I'm going to let her talk a little bit about herself. She is a wonderful therapist that specializes in children age 1 all the way up to 21 and their parents and their caregivers. And she's also a dear friend of mine. And we created intuitive parenting together as a way for people inside the sensitive empowerment community, parents and grandparents, aunts, uncles, anyone that has a child in their life that they care about is welcome to come to our discussions that we hold quarterly to support everyone. And Carolina, I'm so glad you're here with me. Do you want to share a little bit with everybody so they can know about all the wonderful things you do?
oh, thank you, Carol. Sure. My name is Carolina Mariposa, and as Carol mentioned, I have worked as a psychotherapist for the past over 2 decades now. And I had a parallel track while I was working as a licensed psychotherapist as an energy healer. I'm certified in the modality called intuition medicine. And I had clients for therapy and I had clients for energy medicine. And about 3 years ago, I decided that I wanted to combine these two modalities because in working with highly sensitive people, I found that the combination was really powerful and that many of the energy healing tools that I have learned over the years and practiced are kind of the missing link for highly sensitive people, especially people who are empaths, who really absorb other people's emotions and sometimes even physical sensations. So I could work with them using traditional mental health counseling and adding in energy healing and coaching on energy medicine techniques as needed. So I started a business called Butterfly Grove, and I offer what I call intuitive guidance or intuitive coaching. And as you mentioned, I work with children throughout the lifespan from infancy. I'm actually endorsed by the state of California as an infant mental health specialist for kids 0 to 6. And then I also work with parents and grandparents and teens. I love the whole spectrum. And I'm excited to be here today. And I love our intuitive parenting discussions. And I'm looking forward to this Q&A today.
Yay. Yes. And I have to say too that Carolina's website, the Butterfly Grove website, is so soothing and beautiful. There's
Thank
there's
you.
a little tip for me, an insider tip. If you want to calm yourself down, just go on over there and look at all her pictures. She
Thank
has
you.
such a caring way about her that as you can hear and feel through our conversation here. So to me, it's just an honor and a privilege because she's also one of my dearest friends to be able to do intuitive parenting with her. Just a little bit about myself. Both Carolina and I are mothers. What really makes it fun for us is we are able to cover the whole spectrum because my daughter is grown. She's a young adult now who's 20 and off to college. And Carolina's daughter is just, in that
She's 5.
5, and I can't believe
Sorry, I
it.
didn't mention her earlier. Thank you,
Oh,
Carol.
no, it's important. But we're able to go through some of the things that we've already been through ourselves to help caregivers not feel alone. There's a lot of feelings of isolation that we hear as a repetitive theme when we're talking to other parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. And people often think they're the only one that has this particular challenge or issue, and that's definitely not the case. So the other reason that we created intuitive parenting, it's called Intuitive Parenting, Ask Carolina and Carol. And so we have our sessions that we do inside the sensitive empowerment community. We try to do them about quarterly, every couple months. And this is a special one where Carolina and I are actually answering questions that people wrote to us from the community, and we gathered them together, and we're going to be working on answering some of the main themes that kind of surface through the questions. We found that some of the questions were very specific to homeschooling. That is part of where my background is. I had my daughter in a small private school from pre-K through 2nd grade, and then we ended up homeschooling from 3rd through 9th grade. and then she transitioned into a large high school. So I certainly am no expert, but I am able to talk about all the different challenges and also the positive aspects of things that you can do when you customize education for your child or to support their needs as a sensitive child so they can thrive. And I also was a volunteer children's librarian. So one of the things that's really near and dear to me are children's books and children being represented, especially sensitive and neurodivergent children are not really as represented in books that we have today. So one of the first questions that we're going to just touch on briefly includes an invitation to join Carolina and I at our next event, which is going to be September 23rd at 2 o'clock Pacific time. We're both in California. And that will be held again inside the Sensitive Empowerment Community. And we're going to, our theme for the one in September is sensitive books and that support sensitive children for all ages. And so Carolina and I are going to bring a few of our favorite books, and we're inviting everyone to join us with books that they've found helpful for their sensitive child. And that partly came from a question that we did have from inside the community. Somebody said that wrote to us and said that they can see that their young children are HSPs and that they were struggling to find books that would support helping them manage their emotions and their feelings of overwhelm. And so that's a good chance to just briefly mention that our founder of the Sensitive Empowerment Community, Julie B. Yellen, and I have started a children's book series specifically for sensitive and neurodivergent children, and it's based around her wonderful magical dog Nico, and it's called The Adventures of Nico, the Highly Sensitive Dog. And our book one, The Magic Portal, has just been released, and we're going to have a whole series where each one of the books touches on a different quality that's pretty much universal to all highly sensitive people, and hopefully provide some solutions and some enjoyment and whimsy while you're reading along. And
They're
Carol,
so good.
oh, thank you. And
They're
she's been a
so
big
great.
help.
My daughter loves book one, and we're so
Oh,
excited for the next one.
thank you so much. So that we'll definitely touch a little bit more on that at our get together in September too, but we welcome everyone. The other thing about intuitive parenting is you don't have to be a parent. We also welcome grandparents. We've had grandparents, we have aunts, uncles, teachers, librarians, anyone that works with children, sensitive or neurodivergent children are completely welcome, and we encourage you to come along and join us. So we have, as I mentioned, we had some questions that were presented to us from the community. So some of the ones that were about homeschooling, as I mentioned, we pulled those out separately, and we felt they needed a lot of their own special attention and spotlight on those. So I went ahead and wrote a blog post that's going to appear within the community in the parenting and grandparenting section of the Sensitive Empowerment Community. And it's also going to be appearing in the fall in Julie B. Ellen's wonderful blog, which is a great resource at juliebellen.com. If you haven't visited there, she's got all kinds of things to support people of all ages that are sensitive. And then Carolina and I went and we carefully looked at the other questions, and a couple of themes emerged in Carolina, that we thought would be really helpful. All right, so do you want to lead us off on our first one, which is going to be talking about what it's like as a caregiver or parent when there's a lot of strong emotions going on with our child, and trying to keep ourselves regulated so we can be the best parent we can be in the moment.
Yes. Yes. This came up in a lot of different scenarios, and it's one of the most common things that people come to see me about is how to stay calm. I want to talk first about why it's important to stay calm, because not all of us understand that. So, when we are parenting, there's a concept called co-regulation or mutual regulation that actually comes from infant mental health, but is now being talked about more in the wider community around nervous systems and how nervous systems can be flexible or not, and how easily nervous systems can get overloaded. This comes up a lot in Julie's blogs. And when we are calm, when we're able to keep ourselves calm and regulated emotionally, our child who may be dysregulated in that moment is more likely to be able to return to a calm state. If we escalate, and probably all of us have had the experience of we need our kid to get something done. They're throwing a fit and we just get angry in return, maybe, or we get abrupt. It usually escalates the child, right? Because our nervous system is escalated and then they're escalating emotionally and in their nervous system. So, as much as we can practice our own nervous system regulation, our own emotional regulation, the easier it's going to be for our child to return to a baseline of calm when they are getting dysregulated. And all of us who are highly sensitive get dysregulated more easily than neurotypical people. And there's a concept that I learned about in my mental health training called the window of tolerance. And the basic idea is that we we have a comfort zone that in which we can handle things that come at us during the day. But for highly sensitive people, that window of tolerance, that comfort zone is pretty small because there's so much beating on the window, all day long. We're experiencing things in
Yes.
such a deep way and we're processing things, every little detail that a neurotypical person may not. And so we want to find ways to have a baseline window of tolerance that is as big as possible, even when we're highly sensitive. And the best way to do that is to cultivate. It really is a daily practice. There's not a quick fix for it, as most people know. So you want to have two legs of the practice. You want to have one that's preventative. And many people talk about mindfulness as a way to have a more regulated state and expand the window of tolerance. And you want to practice ways that as a parent calm you proactively. So for example, in my day-to-day, I always make sure I do at least 15 minutes of a qigong practice and at least 5 minutes of a meditation before I get going in the morning, because that helps me start the day with a calm baseline. Whereas if I skip that, my window is already smaller. It helps me expand the window at the start of the day.
I
So
love.
practices like that, if you can have a daily meditation practice, something like that helps too. Or if meditation doesn't work for you, maybe it's exercise. Maybe you're going for a walk every day. So really, that's sort of the macro level of how we keep ourselves regulated. But those kind of prevention strategies and self-care strategies really are helpful. And then we want to have strategies we rely on in a crisis or in a moment when our child is dysregulated. And so usually the fastest way to getting everyone regulated is through some kind of somatic or physical intervention, because it's our bodies that are getting off kilter. So I do things like, and I know Julie teaches as well, deep breathing, self massage, self talk. Self talk doesn't work as well because it's a cognitive strategy, but sometimes if you're combining it, like I'll often, I don't know if you can see, but I'll like pat my chest
I was just
and
gonna
just
say,
say, it's
yeah,
going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And I'll do these things out loud with my little one. I mean, it's a little weird, but I'll just say, or I might say, I'm going to take some deep breaths right now because I can see you're really upset and I want to try to keep my body calm so I can be here for you.
oh, that is
So there's
so
ways we can model it. A lot of times, if we're trying to get our kids to practice something in the moment, it's not going to work because
no.
they're too dysregulated. But if we're practicing it and we're able to stay calm, at least we're not off the rails, right? We at least have still some control of the situation.
I love that so much too, because I love how you're modeling it. And like
Mhm.
we said, that they could be, when everyone's upset, we know we're not in a place my daughter and I talk about this a lot, when we're feeling a lot of emotion or something has triggered us to feeling upset, whatever the gamut of emotion it is, uh, we're not in a place where we can hear each other very well, or we can not in a place where we can come up with solutions. So we've actually, we just like you said, saying that out loud, we actually will say that out loud to each other. And I will try to
That's
remind
great.
her and I that, hey, we need to take a few minutes and then we'll go do just what you said, do whatever it is that feels calming. And then we'll come back together when we can actually come up with a solution for something. But I'm thinking about too, the little ones watching your parent, it was beautiful just seeing how you were putting your hand over your chest when you're talking about the self massage. Or I remember once we talked about leaving our hand on our chest as just kind of a loving gesture. It also helps you with doing your breathing because it feels calming. And then
Mhm.
think of what amazing difference it'd be as a child to grow up seeing your parent being loving to themselves, calming themselves, and then showing, and then they could come back later and say, well, what was that thing you were doing? Or I want to try it now. Or, I just want to encourage people that even in the moment, if it feels like they're not listening or it feels like nothing's being accomplished, if you can make yourself feel better through anything that Carolina just shared, you have no idea what's being locked away in your child's mind and can come out and help them later and be a wonderful gift to have that modeling. So that's beautiful, Carolina.
Thank you. I love what you said. And I just want to add from the woo woo side of me, from the energy medicine side of me, there's one technique that I teach people a lot to separate our energy from the energy of our child, because in those moments, especially if we're highly empathic and our child is highly empathic, we're often merging our energy. And so
Yes,
we can't really even tell in those moments whether we're really upset or we're just feeling our child being upset.
absolutely.
And so I'll often just have parents, and I'll do this myself, is I'll silently pick out 5 things, neutral things that are different between us. So I might say, I'm wearing glasses. She's not. She's wearing a white t-shirt. I'm wearing a green shirt, just really basic, observable things. And in doing that, it separates our energy a little bit and gives us a chance to know how we're feeling. Because many of us we're so caring, we have the capacity to listen and be supportive with our child. There's no question about that. But it's just that merging that makes it hard. So I like to teach that as a way to just separate a little bit. You can even visualize while you're doing your physical coping strategies. You can have sort of a split screen in your mind, visualize some kind of boundary between the two of you, an energy boundary. Maybe you're surrounded by gold and your child's surrounded by blue. You can just quickly imagine, bring those things to your mind so that you're seeing them separately, because to remind yourself that you're separate is often really helpful as an empath.
I think that's just incredible. I mean, that is so helpful. And for everyone listening, Caroline and I can't say the number of times that we've had groups of parents and caregivers from all over the world joining us. That's one of the great things about the sensitive empowerment communities. It's so comforting. You have somebody from Australia or Romania or England, and we're in both in California and in the United States, but people from all over the world, and they bring up something that they're worried about and they think that they're the only one, and it's just exactly the same as what we've gone through too. So
Right.
that's very unifying and hopefully comforting to everyone to know that these are similar things that happen for all parents and caregivers that are highly sensitive. Because like you said, Carolina, it's like our hearts are like completely wide open. There's
Mhm.
no wall around them at all. And so it makes it easy to be a very loving and caring parent, but at the same time, like you said, it's like we're like a little sponge that absorbs everything that's happening to them. And I know
Mhm.
for myself, feels almost intolerable when my child is upset or sad or has been hurt or
Right.
feeling something. It's just exactly what you said. So using those tools you said and helping myself remember what you're teaching us, that I'm my own person and she's her own person, and I can still love her with everything I have, but those are her feelings that are going on, and I can be a lot better mom if I remember that I'm fine and I'm there, it's not happening to me and it's happening to her. So we can just focus on taking care of her. So I love those were fantastic tips and strategies that you gave us. And it's a great segue into one of the other main question or themes that we had too, which was about helping our child when they feel emotional, which is completely understandable during these huge transitions in life, whether it's their first time being dropped off at preschool or they're going to, we can talk about these individually too, but there's the transition where you've been in elementary school for years and suddenly you're off at a junior high or a middle school. And then, of course, the transition to high school, which is huge also. And all of those things, I was just thinking about what you were saying about the five thinking about 5 things that are different, because that moment when you're driving in the car to this new place, or you're walking to the new place, they're so nervous, they're so worried. Those are all normal things that they should feel. But we're feeling it too, like, oh my gosh, it's almost
Definitely.
like our first day of school again or whatever. And you feel almost helpless, like you were little again, and so that, I
Mhm.
think that would be a great place to practice what you just said too, to help us remember, okay, we're adults, we're grown, we have tons of tools and tons of ways to help our child. And just because they're feeling overwhelmed in this huge transition, we can be their source of calm, and we're not actually going through it, but they are.
Yeah.
And we can put all the focus on helping them. So I think that's a great one. We got a lot of questions that came in about how to help through these transitions. So
Mhm.
I have a couple of things that I can share later that I help with my daughter when we're transitioning to high school, but I'd love to hear, especially since you're going through it in real time with your daughter too. All of
Mhm.
those little transitions are huge to the child, and a
Right.
great chance to practice what you have just been talking to us about.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Well, the first thing I always keep in mind is that window of tolerance concept that I talked about
Oh, yes,
earlier, and how any big transition, any big event is going to make it smaller and smaller. It's going to be that much likely that we're going to have more meltdowns, both of us, maybe the parent, the child,
yes,
that we're going to have sleep troubles, that we're going to have worries. All those things are much more likely during a big transition. And so, unlike a meltdown that might happen in the moment and you're trying to find a strategy in the moment to stay regulated. The nice thing about big transitions is that you do have a lot of advance notice, usually, like, they're going to be starting a new school in the fall.
right,
They're leaving home maybe to go to college. And so you have a lot of time to process it together before it happens and after. And it's important, I think, to make that time at least a month before to start planning to normalize for your child that this is going to be
absolutely,
a stressful time. This is going to be a time where our window is small. And how can we support you? And this is how I'm going to support myself, because parents, I mean, it is your kid's transition, but it's a big deal when your kid goes to a new school. It is kind of our big deal too. So
it is,
it's okay for you to model that for your kid. It's going to be a big deal for me that you're leaving home or that you're going to this new school. And so I'm going to be practicing XYZ to kind of proactively. So really planning that. One big piece I think that some people forget about it because a new school year is starting and there's so much more social input at that time is to reduce the social calendar aside from school, because so many things are often starting at the same time. There's clubs starting, there's sports starting. So as
yeah,
much as possible, not making play dates necessarily, or social plans on the weekends. If you can reduce the calendar just to give your kid that time, and you really the time to process how the first week went, how the second week went, how they're feeling the week before even that it starts, and keeping the communication open. And then there's just practical things that you can do as well, just around whatever the transition is. How can you prepare them logistically? So can you go to the new site, for example? Can
yeah,
you meet some of the teachers or some of the kids that are going to be in that environment? Can you have summer play dates if they're little, with kids who are going to be in the same kindergarten class? A lot of schools set that up, which I think is great. I know my
yes,
daughter's class did. They set up kindergarten play dates over the summer. Um, and then you want to make sure that you're setting up a routine for checking in, especially once the school starts or once the big transition has occurred, because there's a lot of adrenaline in the beginning. It takes a while to really know how it's going. There's the initial
absolutely,
stress. And then once they get used to it, you as much as we want it to be great for them, there may be things about it that are hard. It might not have been the best choice of school for them. I mean, you've been
right.
through that. I've been through that.
Oh,
So
yeah,
you have to leave space for ongoing discussion to evaluate. Like, don't make any decisions the first few months because you're just getting used to it. But once you are used to it, how is it going? And do we need to make more changes? Do we need to reduce activities because the day is so long and you're so tired? is this a bad environment for you? Or are you experiencing challenges with particular kids or particular teachers? So there's a lot of troubleshooting that may happen after. And I think our kids, no matter what age, as long as we're keeping the conversation open and letting them know we're there for them, making it safe for them to talk about this stuff, and even, especially as they get older, sharing our own stories about challenges we might have had in that transition. I remember when I went to high school and I was, bullied by a senior and it was horrible, like just telling them how we made it through, what we would have done differently. I think that came up in our last intuitive parenting
It
group.
did.
So just keeping the conversation open. And then if you have a younger kid who's not as good in conversation, a lot of parents, if you just play with your kid in a non-directive way, I'll sit with my kids for half an hour, and play and just let them direct me or let them act out whatever they're going to act out. And they often tell you what's going on when through their play. So they might not say, "Mom, this kid was mean to me," but they might act out a scenario with their dolls that, you know, it's kids being mean to each other. And so then you kind of problem solve in the play. Um, and then, again, the woo-woo side of me, I use a lot of tools to sort of set the intention for the transition ahead of time, that it will be for my child's highest healing path or their highest good. We might do art about it together. I mean, it's a little woo-woo-y, but some people vision board, like what they want their new school to be, how they want their college experience to be.
Yeah.
I'm all about setting the intention and really grounding in as much that we can have control. Obviously, there's going to be things outside of our control, but what do we really want from this transition? What do we want to get out of it? How do we want to feel? And how do we want to be when we're in this new environment? So I really encourage people to set those intentions and talk about that or create art around that ahead of time. And then, of course, the traditional coping skills, talking about coping skills that they can practice when they're sitting in the new class for the first time, when they're interacting with kids who might not be so nice, just trying to have individual strategies that they can do within them, having people they can go to in the school environment when they're having challenges. And again, knowing that you're there for them no matter what. So that's a lot, but
Oh, those were so wonderful. And I absolutely love the window of tolerance.
Mm,
Because what a beautiful thing to teach, because so many of us, that's another thing in the community, it doesn't matter what age or where people are in the world, everyone can relate to being told that they were too sensitive, as if that was a terrible flaw that needed to be eradicated from their personality and that needed to be changed. And if we had only been able to talk to you and
oh,
understand about this window of tolerance, and what it made me think about was, if we say, okay, our window of tolerance is smaller because we have these wonderful gifts, because we're taking in so much micro data, so many nuances, so many little things that other people miss. We're lucky that we get to experience things at such a high level. And that can cause great euphoria and enjoyment for beautiful things like sunset or a piece of music that brings you to tears, or really feel
yes.
a story or a book. So those are all wonderful things. But when it comes to these transitional times, and when you were talking about the window of tolerance becomes smaller, if we're able to think about that as, okay, this isn't a negative thing. We're just going in, we're going to create a whole bunch of ways to help ourselves. So, and be really compassionate and really loving to ourselves, that our window of tolerance is smaller. And so a couple of things that came to mind for me was the adrenaline, like you talked about. The window of tolerance is automatically smaller if a highly sensitive person doesn't have a good night's rest and they don't have a
Yes.
good night's sleep. The whole day is a little bit challenging, to say the least. And
Hmm.
so if you're off to a new environment where you're already nervous and scared, and you didn't sleep the night before because you were nervous and scared about it, that's a great thing to share about, on the way to school or whatever. That it's okay. You're going to be sleepy today. You're going to be tired today. It might make things feel a little harder, but it's not going to always feel like that. That's something to help too with the perspective. And then I was thinking about things that my daughter and I did to help make things feel normal, even when everything else around her felt overwhelming or scary. And so like for her, because she was going into a high school setting where they were allowed to use their phone, in between classes on their lunch break and things like that, we came up with a little heart emoji, and she would just text the heart emoji. It meant that she was doing fine. She didn't have time to tell me what was
So
going on, but she was doing okay.
great.
And
Yeah.
I would drop one off for her. And that meant that I was okay too, that I miss you, I love you. And, but we obviously couldn't get into long conversations about it. So that was one thing. Another thing I loved that you said about was visiting the site ahead of time. We actually went so far as to drive there and time how long it took, so we could paddle extra time at the beginning and the end of the drive to make it feel calmer, because that's something we've learned from Julie Bieland, who runs the sensitive empowerment community, taught a wonderful neurodiversity class that I was fortunate enough to take, where she talked about the idea of the HSP, or the highly sensitive person, having a slow morning. Because if we get
Yes.
up and start out of the gate, as you know, Carolina, it's kind of rushing to get ready for school or work or whatever we're doing. It's like she told us it was kind of like you have your foot on the gas pedal and you're just flooring it right out of the gate. Instead of when you're driving your car all day, you want to think about slowly, evenly having the gas or pumping the brakes slowly, so it doesn't feel like you're in panic mode the whole time. So my daughter and I found, by timing the route to school and then padding it a little bit on each end, with some time to sit in the parking lot before she got out of the car, that was really helpful. The other couple quick things were that we packed things for her lunch that were her favorite foods that were familiar, and we would pack the same lunch over and over again, because she felt comforted knowing that maybe everything else would be new, but she knew what was waiting for her at lunchtime, and they were the things that were easy for her to eat that she
Sweet.
liked.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other one was I let her make a playlist for the car. And
Mm.
if your child's really small, you can make it for them, but we listened to our same favorite songs. It was her choice, whatever songs, music she wanted to listen to on the way to school and the way home. And one of the big things, last things I'll share here about that I found with her through all the teen years, was I was eager when she got in that car, when I picked her up. I wanted to hear everything that happened. How can I help? What happened? What was going? She just wanted to listen to the music and not talk. And she was really wise about it. She said, Mom, I've had teachers talking to me all day, telling me information. I can't take any more in. And she just couldn't
Yes.
talk about anything, which I totally respect. And so that became a new thing too, was the way home was just nothing but music and no talking. So
I love
that's
that.
another, yeah. So maybe that's another thing, is like you were saying, if your child is too small to tell you about a problem they're having with a classmate, they can show you through play. Your
Mhm.
middle school or your high school, even your college age children, you can just simply say, what would you like to do? Do you want to have no talking? Do you need to just zone out? Do you want to have your headphones on to the music, or should we all listen to the music? Whatever it is that they need, that's it. And they can feel supported by actually not doing anything. Because
Yes,
it's
that's
actually
great.
something for them. Yeah, it's something customized to them to make them feel calm and peaceful, back in a safe place again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great reminder. I love that. My daughter doesn't usually want to talk in the car either. I'm like, "How was school?" I don't want to talk
Yes,
about it.
yes.
So so I've learned things usually come out by dinner time, sometimes
Yeah,
before, but
yeah.
yeah, they just need some time to decompress and
Oh,
not
they
have
do.
demands sometimes.
And it reminded me too of another one of our conversations we had with a lot of moms of junior high school age students that we had in our last intuitive parenting, was also the idea of, you could leave a journal for your child
Oh
at
yeah.
their bedside, and then they could write out a question and they could leave it for you, and you could write back and forth. Because sometimes, I know with my daughter, we even would text within the house, because it just felt, she was just tired and she just wanted to ask me something, and she said it just felt more comfortable to write it to me in a text. So that's another thing to remember too, is how does your child best like to express themselves? Would they
Mhm.
just prefer to write it out? Would they prefer to, call you at lunchtime and talk to you on the phone, but not talk in the car in person? Maybe not talk in front of everyone at the dinner table, but they'd rather, later on, right before bed, maybe just sit and have a cup of tea together, and and talk then. Like you said, they'll come around at their own speed, and that's where we have to separate ourselves out and how eager we are to hear about everything
I
from what
know.
they actually need.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
well, and
beautiful.
we have just a little bit more time, and so I know one of the things that so we've talked about helping ourselves stay regulated. We've helped talked about the transitional things we can do to help our child going to different schools or different activities. The other question that was asked to us is when our child is having intense emotions, just some other things that we can do to help them just to feel better in the moment. Once we've gotten ourself, used your wonderful words of wisdom, we have ourself in a really calm place. They're feeling whatever they're feeling. And sometimes I know I want you to talk about this, Caroline. I know for me sometimes because I didn't have it role modeled when I was little, I grew up in an era where I grew up in the 60s and 70s where parents really weren't given much tools. So I have a lot of compassion. My mom and dad grew up during the Depression. People didn't talk about feelings. There wasn't counseling available. There wasn't books and the internet and everything. So I'm not trying to be disrespectful to them, but there was no conversation about people's emotion. And actually in our house, we were supposed to not have any. We
Mhm.
had one sibling that we had a lot of emotion, and then my job was to be very quiet and not have any. So when you're parenting and you didn't have that example for you, I found a lot of times I just sort of go blank and I wasn't really sure
Mhm.
where I'd freeze. And I just wanted so much to help my daughter, but I wasn't sure exactly what I was supposed to do. And so
Mhm.
besides, we can always, of course, hug them and give them love, but what are some other things that you recommend when our child is having a wide range of emotions? That was one of the questions that came through from
Mhm.
the community.
Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts that are coming into my mind. So the on a macro level, one of the things I like to teach kids about emotions is that they're called emotions because they're supposed to move through us. So
Oh, I love that.
we don't want to push them down and not feel them, and we also want them to move safely through us. We don't want to hurt ourselves or hurt other people when
Yes.
our emotions are moving through us. So, from a young age, I talked to a lot of different kids in therapy or counseling, and my own kid and her friends about just letting the feelings move through us in a safe way. And I sometimes will remind myself, it's not always appropriate in the moment with your child, but remind myself that they've had this big feeling before and they've made it through.
Good.
Because I think we've all probably had the experience as highly sensitive parents where a kid has a massive emotion, right? They yell or they scream or they cry, and 10 minutes later they're totally fine, like nothing ever happened, and we're still recovering, right? We're just like, what was that? Like, it's going to take me 2 hours to recover, and you're acting like you're fine. So, just reminding ourselves that because we're that safe container for them, they're going to move through it and get to a place of regulation. And that a lot of times kids need to have a big emotion and release it in order to get back to a regulated state. So we don't want to fix it too quickly. I think sometimes we think that if your child's having a big emotion that we should fix it or that we should stop it, or soothe
Right.
it right away.
Yes.
And really sometimes they just need to get it out. And so it's about practicing that self-soothing as the parent and energetic separation just to give them a safe space to do that. And of course sometimes we have to set limits if they are expressing things in an unsafe way. um, I talk a lot about having a safe body and hands to ourselves. And if they're needing to move their body, that's fine. They can stomp, they can hit a bed or, something soft. They can
Oh, right.
hit the air, they can go run around the yard. A lot of kids need a physical release
Yes.
along with the emotion. And so we talk usually in times of calm about what their style is and what they think would be the
Oh, I
most
love
helpful.
that.
So, kind of being proactive. I notice you've had a lot of meltdowns lately. Let's talk about some ways that we can help you when those are happening so that we're
Yeah,
ready next time. Do you
I
think
love it.
running around the yard would help? A lot of rhythmic movement helps, sound helps, sometimes singing. You mentioned music earlier, that helps. Um, banging on a drum might help. There's so many ways, and it's really individual to each kid. Some
Yeah.
kids want to go and be alone until they calm down and they can't handle a person trying to comfort them. And some kids really want comfort, but might not always know how to ask for it. So having a plan ahead of time, and even just reminding them, like last time you said when you got upset, you would want a hug. Do you want that hug now?
I
Um,
love
or do
that.
you not feel ready yet? So just kind of planning ahead a little bit if you can, and then just giving them a safe space for that emotion to move. And not, it's really tricky for us who are empaths because sometimes people's emotions make us anxious, right? Like even if we're
Yeah.
like, okay, she's getting upset and something's going to happen, and we're getting stressed in our own space. And so just doing those separations, soothing ourselves. Again, it goes back to that co-regulation idea that as much as we're able to stay calm in the face of whatever's happening, whether it goes 10 minutes or an hour, sometimes 2 hours. Some kids go for a really long time. They know we're there and we know we're not going to let them hurt themselves. Those are the two biggest things to keep in mind.
Oh, I love that. And I think that especially what you said about when everything's calm, at
Mhm.
another time, not during the middle of everything, but later saying, what could I have done? Or what are you, like you said, you mentioned that a hug felt good. Would you like me to give you one every time? And I like the idea that you said too about, if they need to go off and be by themselves in their room, as long as we make sure they're in a safe place,
Mhm.
I think that's also wonderful too, because then we get a chance to take care of ourselves so that when they do want to talk about it, that we're ready. And also the quick check-in too, you mentioned earlier about if our bodies are feeling out of whack. uh,
Yeah.
and so I was thinking about too the my daughter and I came up with the thing that we make sure we have our breakfast first before we talk about anything.
Yes.
That's part of the slow morning thing. It sometimes, to be honest, we'd have to eat in the car on the way to school because we're tired and we're moving slowly, and that's okay too. But
Mhm.
it's important, like you said, to check in, because if we have low blood sugar, if we're feeling tired, those things really make the window of tolerance small, and then we can't come up with wonderful solutions or brainstorm ideas. And so if the very best that we can do in the moment is give each other time to go off and have something to eat and do something ourselves to take care of ourselves, and then we come back later, that's fantastic. So I
Definitely.
think, and I think, I know we have to wrap up, and so I wanted to touch also on what you said, because we talked about this in our last intuitive parenting. One of the moms, we were so proud of her because she was giving her teenage daughter space to share something that she had done, a challenging situation, and how she had handled it. And the
Mm.
idea of not rushing in, not trying to solve it right away, not making, like you just said, let them have their emotion. We don't have to make it all go away. That's a huge parenting skill that
Mhm.
is not easy to do, because we want to wrap our arms around them and make it all stop. But I
Mhm.
love and appreciate you, Carolina, for reminding all of us that emotions are normal and they're important, and that we need to let them move through us. I love that idea that the word motion is in emotion.
Mhm.
And I think that anything that we can do, and especially the things that we touched on in this conversation, to take good care of ourselves and remember that we can be the best parents, the best caregivers, and everything if we're role modeling, um, how we do it ourselves to stay calm and regulated.
Definitely. And I guess I'll just add one other thing, which is that some parents aren't sure what's normal and what's
Yes.
not in terms of the intensity of meltdowns and the frequency of them. And so I talk to parents about if you're feeling like it's hard, but you can manage it. There isn't a hard and fast rule like 5 times a day is you need therapy. There's no rule like that. It's really what do you feel like you can handle, and then what's too much for you as a parent, and what do you feel like is too much for your child? Because some people have more tolerance than others. So, but I would say generally, if you're feeling like you're dysregulated a lot as a parent by what's happening with your child, that's a time for you to seek help. There's no shame in that at all. And it really models for
Absolutely.
your child, like these meltdowns are hard for me too. And so I'm going to talk with somebody and see, what we can do, just to get some ideas.
Oh, I love
So
it.
it's not pathologizing anybody. It's just we all need help. It takes a village, and our kids,
Absolutely.
it can be really intense. And I encourage people to, even if it's not a professional help, just to reach out to a friend, a fellow parent.
Yes.
That's why I love our group so much, because we're
Me
we're
too.
learning from each other. A lot of
Oh,
us who are parents right now you mentioned a little bit about your history, but our conditioning was we have to handle things on our own. So many of us are not conditioned to reach out for help or to call up that friend or to talk to an elder who might have advice because they didn't have any for us when we were younger. And so
exactly.
really making a point of cultivating a community, a village that can help you and your child to feel like you can manage everything is important.
Oh, it's so important, and that's the perfect note to stop on. So we want to encourage everyone, if you are a highly sensitive person or you have a highly sensitive or neurodivergent person in your family, the sensitive empowerment community is just such a lovely, welcoming, supportive place. And inside the community, Carolina and I would welcome you to come to our intuitive parenting events. Usually we have lots of other parents there talking and sharing, so it's not just us. But this was a special event that we created to answer questions. And then also there's a lot of resources. Our founder, Julie Bielen, has a wonderful website, and like we mentioned, her blog, and there's blog posts in there that Carolina's written, that I've written. And she also hosts this podcast, the HSP podcast, and that has wonderful resources too, if you look back through some of her previous recordings. And the last thing to remind everybody is there's a wonderful replay library within the sensitive empowerment community that has all of the live events, but there's an intuitive parenting section within there that has Caroline and I. We always write a recap of every one of our conversations are private that we have. We don't record the ones where we invite other parents to join us, so people feel safe sharing about their family and their child. But this one was a special recorded event, as I mentioned. But we do recaps that you can go through and read through and see that you're not alone, and that many people ask the same questions, and we're all just doing the best we can. And we should all give ourselves a pat on the back, because we're raising a whole new sensitive generation of wonderful children to go out and shine their light. And we're so glad that you joined us today. And thank you, Carolina. I love being with you. And I look
Oh,
forward
thank
to
you.
our next event will be in September on the 23rd, and we hope to see you there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carol.
All right. Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.